Hello, this is a video meant to show you how to burst on Beast Tamer. So Beast Tamer is a 3-minute burst slash support class, and for Beast Tamer specifically, a lot of the damage is concentrated in the first 15 seconds of the burst. So BT is a very nice class to have in the burst and bind meta. For BT's burst itself, it requires a lot of setup, and the burst is entirely iframed, and it's also not that hard to execute because the damage itself just comes from holding down a couple buttons. So yeah, BT is characterized by a long burst setup, but also a very easy time damaging the boss. So BT needs to pull buffs from all animal modes to make the full use of the class, and because of this, the setup is a little modular, so as long as you know what you're doing, you can play around with how you do things and the order of operations. My BT friends, they have different orders of setting up their burst than me, but I'll just show my version of bursting. I won't really talk about others' versions too much because there's a lot of variations you could do. So the first thing is to have mana overload on before the burst. In most bosses, you're gonna have this on anyway without having to touch it most of the time. I would advise you to buy auto MP pot for your pets because BT does use mana extremely quickly. So we have this attack called Hammers. It's our main attack, but it's not technically a hurricane skill, so each attack counts as an individual one, so it will all drain mana, which means BT's mana bar goes down incredibly quickly when you I don't even have Meow card on. When you're at max attack speed, it's really fast. So that's why in bosses that limit your healing or potion usage, you should definitely not have it on all the time. So you'll be turning mana overload off when your main burst is over and when you have to start DPSing. So yeah, that's why just before every burst, make sure you have mana overload on. And then the next step is to cast your 3-minute long buffs. So refresh Meow card, and then go to Hawk and cast your Hawk buffs. It's basically everything except for the useless haste Hawk buff for the Hawk buffs. And then next you'll want to cast your 60-second burst buffs. So Whistle, Circus, and Maple World Goddess Blessing. So a couple of BT skills have no cast time. So what that will allow you to do is cast them even when you're in the middle of an animation for another skill. So Whistle has a very long animation, but Circus has no animation. That means you can cast Circus in the middle of the Whistle animation, and that will make your burst a little bit more fluid. Just keep in mind that if you die after Circus goes off, then your Circus will stop attacking for the rest of the duration. So you do lose out on damage if you do that. If you die, I mean. So that's what this looks like. Pay attention to how my Circus goes off during Whistle. You can look at the cooldowns if you didn't catch it. And then after this, switch to bear mode and toggle on bear assault and place down Lil Fort. Be careful not to double tap or hold down Lil Fort too long, because Lil Fort will die instantly. So right now I'm holding down Lil Fort and he died instantly. And if I double tap during the animation, he also died instantly. So just tap Lil Fort one time. This also adds a little bit of extra clunkiness putting down a summon. So you don't have to feel like you should be putting down Lil Fort if you're trying to catch up with the rest of your party, or you're just behind on your burst setup. So you can leave out Lil Fort if you want. And by the way, Bear Assault is another skill that has 0 cast animation, so you can toggle it on while you're doing other stuff if you happen to have forgotten to cast it. Anyway, after that, you want to start popping your really short buffs next. So go to cat mode and then put down Cradle on top of the boss, and then pop your AB Link, your Team Roar, and your Ozring. And then you can bind somewhere during this phase. Because Lil Fort and Cradle are summons that only exist at a fixed location, you're gonna really want to try not to let the boss get away. So if you have to bind before you've cast AB Link and Team Roar, that's fine. You don't have to get the full duration out of bind. Bind is mainly gonna be useful for securing the aerial relief damage. So aerial relief has a long cast animation just like Whistle, and the damage does not come immediately. So it's very easy to whiff if you don't have the boss bound. Okay, so after you casted your short buffs, next it comes to actual damage. So two more skills that have 0 cast animation are Cub Cavalry and Chap Charge Cat mode. The other modes of this skill have cast animations, but the tree specifically does not have an animation. So you can press plain and then cast the other two during the animation. See? So after that, you want to switch to hawk mode and then fly, move over the boss, start channeling tornado, and then hold down baby bombers. So you can cast baby bombers while doing a tornado. So the important thing to know is to focus on your character's animations. If you've ever felt that animal switching is clunky and that you have to like try it multiple times or whatever, that's usually because you tried to switch while you're still in the middle of an animation. So what you can do is just you can ready up the select menu anytime, whether your character is casting a skill or not. But don't actually confirm a selection until you see that your character is done with the animation it's currently doing. So I'm going to cast my Bear Blaster to show you as an example. Bear Blaster has a really long animation, but once I see that it's over, I can switch in one try. Yeah, so you really just want to be patient. Don't try to rush the animal mode switching, or else you're going to have to try again multiple times. And the fact that you having to try multiple times, that's what makes BT way clunkier than it really is. So yeah, just keep an eye on your character animation, and then you can waste as little time on your short buffs as possible switching from cat to hawk. So after you've finished tornado, as soon as tornado goes on cooldown, you want to drop out of the sky and switch to bear mode. And then you want to cast your Will and Saren skill, and then just wail on the boss with hammers. As soon as your Cubs and your Champ Charge come back, you can cast them off cooldown and just keep damaging the boss. This is gonna be what you're gonna do for your off burst as well. But do keep in mind that from the moment you start hammering, you should have your mana overload off if you're in a boss that restricts your potion usage, or else you're going to run out of mana and not be able to do anything, even flash jump, for a while. Yeah, so just be careful with that. And please do not try to off-burst DPS with Hawk mode. It kind of sucks. The only situations where you should DPS with Hawk mode is when you really cannot deal with bears having to wind up. So this whole sequence takes like a second, and it doesn't do any damage before the hammers actually start. And this can really screw you over in some bosses like Saren. In Saren, she jabs every 2 seconds, so if you have, and then you have to duck to dodge the jab. So imagine just trying to duck every 2 seconds. You're gonna have to frequently cancel your attack, and it's not gonna result in much damage done. So that's when you would just DPS in Hawk mode instead, because you can just fly above Saren and not even have to deal with the jab. The other situation that Hawk DPS is actually useful is when the ground is just lava. So in Dark Knell, for example, the boss is really easy to die accidentally in, because you can just get chain CC'd when you're on the ground. But in the air, not nearly as many attacks hit you. Plus you have faster response time with your ground hurricane. And the added mobility of glide and your up jump. So you can cheese the boss by just flying above their head and safely doing damage. That's the other reason why you would use Hawk. But if you can use Bear, you should, because that results in more damage. Yeah. So I guess while I'm waiting for my cooldowns to come back, I can explain a little bit more about why I chose to do the burst rotation this way. So you definitely want to include Hawk buffs. They give you like 90 attack combined, which is 90 magic attack, which is really good, and which is not negligible for sure. You definitely want to have your bear buffs on. Lil Fort and your bear toggle provide a lot of damage. But Bear and Hawk are both buffs that do not stay without the help of Whistle, while meanwhile Meowcard does. So you want to, I got the card out of the way first. And then I switched to Hawk mode because the buffs are not really they're not really dependent on anything. So Hawk is easy to have go first. And then, but Bear you have like the summon, and the summon only lasts 60 seconds and has a small range, and it can't even move. So you want to do that. You want to place the summon closer to the bind, time wise, so that the boss has less time to get away from the range of the summon. So that's why I save Bear for after Whistle and pop Hawk buffs before Whistle. And additionally, I burst in Cat mode because Tree and Hawk Champ Charge, they both have a similar effect on DPS to each other. Hawk Champ Charge gives you a 10-second 10 crit damage buff. Meanwhile, Cat Champ Charge has no cast time and can be woven into your burst naturally. And it does a fair amount of damage itself as well. So I prefer to burst in Cat mode at first, particularly because when you place Cradle down, I'll talk about this more in the support video, but Cradle has the FD debuff, but only places it when it actually does damage to the boss, and it doesn't do damage to the boss unless you're in Cat mode, even if it shows damage lines. So it won't actually place the debuff down unless you're in Cat mode and you wait for the damage ticks to happen. But when they do happen, they constantly refresh the duration of the buff, so you can actually get a little more duration out of the Cradle debuff by staying in Cat mode for a little longer. And when you're using Plane in Cat mode, you do get a couple seconds out of Cradle without it being a DPS loss. So I like bursting in Cat mode and then switching to Hawk mode for the second phase of the tornado. Okay, I think that covers everything. Oh wait, no, I didn't talk about Will and Saren's skill. Why do I cast them after all my burst is over? I don't like casting them with my 60-second buffs because it's really risky. So the way I do it, because I do Hawk buffs first and then switch to Bear later, I'm activating the Bear passives that give me HP, max HP. So I lose a lot of my health, and you can imagine I lose. So I'm already 2/3 of my health. If I use Will and Saren, I'll lose another third of my health. So I'll be at like 30% of my health, and then what happens if I take an extra hit? I might just instantly die during my setup, and I'll lose Circus. Circus will stop attacking if I die. So that's just a damage loss. And then if I don't die, there's a chance I might not be able to bind because I need 15% of my HP left over in order to bind, and also a little bit of HP to cast my Oz Ring. So there's plenty of things that could go wrong if you cast Will and Saren's skill and you take damage too quickly. It's extra scarier if you cast these skills in a boss that restricts your healing. So I am very inclined to save Will and Saren for after my burst. It's less damage for sure, but it is less risky and more consistent, and I value consistency over damage. Okay, that is the end of that. I am going to show you a brief demonstration of my full rotation to see what the damage looks like. By the way, Fly, when used on the ground, will automatically lift you up quite a great distance, but you can negate that by jumping and then flying. You'll have a little faster response time by doing that. And also, you can cast Cubs during the animation of Lilfort. So whenever you need to cast Cubs and Champ Charge again, you might as well cast Cub during the animation of Little Fort and replace Little Fort. Yeah, instead of like having to resummon Little Fort at a more arbitrary time. So I'm gonna do it right now. And I know I said that you can cast Cubs during any animation of any other skill, but there's one exception I can think of right now where you can't, and that's Champ Charge. So if you cast Champ Charge first, you won't be able to immediately cast Cubs afterwards. So in my full rotation, I'm just going to use AB Link a second time at the 90-second mark, which is, now. Right, and one thing I forgot to talk about is cooldown skip IA. So cooldown skip IA is pretty good for Beast Tamers because Tornado is a massive part of our damage. And cooldown skipping Tornado can be really nice in certain bosses. Because it renders you immobile, it's not always a good idea to make use of the cooldown skipped Tornado because you won't have access to an iframe to protect you. But in bosses where that's not an issue, it's a lot of extra damage. So you would just do Tornado a second time, maybe you'll fly away to somewhere safe. If you do happen to cooldown skip Tornado, and then you'll just delay the normal DPS part of your burst with like Will and Saren and all that jazz. Also right there, I stopped attacking because again, it's not a hurricane skill, so hammers add to the attack count, which is kind of annoying. Yeah, so you do have to move a little bit for Culvert and whatever. And yeah, also just remember to toggle off mana overload when you're using hammers. When you start to use hammers in a boss that restricts healing and whatever. Okay, now let's go over the damage breakdown. So obviously, because you're just hitting the boss for the full rotation, a lot of the most damaging skills are just going to be your off-burst skills. But you can see here that Tornado Flight and Plane are roughly equivalent in terms of damage. These are the other skills, how much damage they contribute. I should note, Fort Follow Up is our final attack-ish. It's kind of a final attack, it's not really a final attack. And it does do a decent amount of damage, but it only procs when you're on the ground. So when I'm on the ground, you can see the little bear happening here, but when I start jumping, he doesn't show up anymore. So if you can help it, just don't jump too much. It's not like a super big damage loss, but if you are on the ground, you'll have that guy hitting the boss. What else can I say about this? Nothing much really. You can rewind my burst rotation to see the damage distribution over time, but I think at around 15 seconds I've already done like 20 something T, and at a minute it's more like 30 T plus. So like 60% of our damage, let's say, happens in the first minute, and maybe like 40% happens in the first 15 seconds. So that's a pretty bursty damage distribution, and that's just a demonstration of that. Okay, I think that is that's that. So I hope this has been informative for you. Um, oh, right. I want to talk about one last thing, and that is like a little bit of variation. Um, so in the burst rotation I showed you, that's the standard one, plane and then tornado. But Team Roar will run out before like the last second or two of tornado, which can lead to a little bit of lost damage, or maybe a lot if you have a slower buff rotation for that burst. Um, anyway, it's it's the most damage, but it's not the safest option. If you want the safe option for bosses like Black Mage or Kalos or something, if you want to extend your iframe duration, then then do Tornado first and milk out that full duration of Team Roar, and then use Plane after, because Plane is its own iframe as well. Yeah, so that's another thing that I wanted to say, and now I'm done. So I hope this has been a helpful video for you, and yeah, thanks for watching.